what exactly is Trump doing? What is best case scenario? What is worst case scenario? And then what are your personal thoughts?
Let's look at your Air Force Ones or your Dunks that you guys are wearing there, or your Converse.
Jordan.
Those things are made, or Jordans. Those things are made outside of the United States, even though the company that makes them is an American company. And what happens is they're made over there, and then they're shipped to the United States, and then they're sold to you guys somehow, right? And you would think that that's all fine and good because you're like, well, hold on, this is an American company. I'm supporting an American company. And it turns out that the details are a little bit more complicated than that. So starting in about the year 2000, what happened was there was this, everybody thought that the right thing to do was to push every country in the world to this form of capitalism. And they looked at countries like China and they were like, how do we make China more capitalist? And you would say, well, why would we do that? And the governing logic at the time was, if they're more capitalist, they'll also become more democratic. If they are more democratic, they are more predictable the way that we normally think about countries. So let's not repeat a Cold War. Let's not repeat maybe some other political regime in the 40s or 50s or 60s. And so what happened was we let China into the WTO, the World Trade Organization. And what that allowed corporations to do is basically an enormous form of arbitrage. So let's say that those Jordans were made in the United States and you were paying a worker $25 an hour to work on a line to make that shoe. And then you would send it to Foot Locker and sell it. I'm just being very simple just to kind of explain this example. But now, instead of having to pay sort of any typical form of taxes, Nike, after the year 2000, was able to ask the question, where else could I make this Jordan? And the Chinese raised their hand and they said, hey guys, we have these really great factories. We have extremely good workers. And we can do it for much cheaper than $25 an hour. And so what does Nike do? They send the job over there. Take that one narrow example and apply it across every industry you can imagine, from shoes to iPhones and everything in between. And what has essentially happened over the last 25 years is we have hollowed out an enormous part of the middle-class economy in the United States. And we've explained it away by saying, hey, we don't want to do that kind of work. Instead, we're going to, like all of us, like we'll do a podcast or, somebody will be a consultant. Like you'll just go up the stack, right? They'll say up the stack. And so over the last 25 years, that's been happening. And all of these other countries have benefited from America's largesse. And the reason you can say that is we are the big buyer of record for everything, right? We have the largest economy. The way our economy works is we are all buying shit, all kinds of shit, all manner of it, from that water bottle to that shirt to that hat. 80% of our economy is just consumers buying stuff. And the rest of the world makes an enormous amount of money by feeding that beast. And so you would say, okay, well, what's wrong with that? Now the cost of Jordans is much cheaper. The cost of that, those jeans are cheaper. Life is good. Except it's not, it's more complicated than that, which is then when we turn around and we try to sell our product into those same countries, instead of it being allowed to just come in so that, I'll make an example. Let's say that hat is made in the United States and we want to sell it to somebody in Cambodia or Vietnam. The same way that those Dunks enter the United States with no tax, we would expect that that hat can go into Cambodia and Vietnam with no tax, but that turns out to not be the case.
And why is that? Are they trying to protect local businesses?
It's a great question. I think that for every country, the answer to that question is different, but it typically starts with how can we generate revenue for ourselves. I don't think they have a competitive, New York Yankees hat manufacturer in Vietnam, for the record. But it's just a policy that allows them to make money off of the United States in two ways, right? They make money by making stuff there, sending it to here where we all buy it, and the dollars go back. And then they make money in a different way, which is whenever we try to sell our products there, they can tax it on the way in.
And then why would we tolerate that?
I think what the logic was back to what I said earlier. There was this thought that America is doing really well. We can allow a little bit of this leakage because of the quote unquote greater good. The greater good being, let's get these countries out of poverty. Let's get them, embracing capitalism, democracy.
Benevolence.
I think it's a combination of benevolence as well as there was some strategic rationale. Sometimes you could make a claim that allowing these countries to profit was like a national security thing, right? Like, hey, they'll be there for us if, we ever get into a spat with XYZ other countries. So there was a whole host of complex reasons, but the net result, Andrew, was that this dynamic was happening. But it had been happening for a long time.
Question. And then we can move on. Is it possible that the countries were trying to protect the things that were made there? In other words, like, we have all these cool products that are made in America. Obviously, it's very sexy in a bunch of these third world countries. They're like, listen, we can't let the mom and pop businesses or even the corporations that are thriving in this country be outcompeted, if you will, by the American businesses.
Possibly, but then, I would say, well, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. It can't be a one-way ratchet on globalism and free trade where it's like, you're going to take our stuff, but we're not going to take your stuff.
I agree with you. I'm just trying to find the justification for the country. Like, I imagine
I think to be honest with you, it's probably driven a lot by revenue. It's like it was tolerated. Nobody pushed back.
Right.
Because again, we would say, yes, it's happening, but, and some politician would insert this statement about democracy and capitalism and long-term national security or what have you as the justification.
And then Americans, we don't want any tariffs because it affects our businesses, right? Like, Apple doesn't want any tariffs. I'm sure Uniqlo doesn't want any tariffs. I'm sure Levi's doesn't want anything because it affects the amount of money that they can make. So they're essentially
nobody would want any tariff in an ideal scenario. But now you have to think about, like, what is the government of the United States' responsibility?
Totally. I'm just saying, like, why the private sector hasn't pushed back. And the reason they haven't pushed back is because they would be the ones losing money.
I think they are pretty violently pushing back. Everybody that hasn't been exempted, I think, is pushing back. So, and what they're trying to point out is like, hey, listen, like, these tariffs have a real price.
No, I meant why they wouldn't push back about the unfairness that had happened over the last 25 years. Like, for example, Apple, that wasn't tariffed at all, wasn't going, hey, you know what? China's tariffing us. Maybe we should tariff them because it would hurt their bottom line.
Well, let's be honest. How many Chinese can afford to buy a $3,000 iPhone versus how many Americans can buy a $3,000 iPhone? And the reality is that when you factor in, again, this goes back to what I said before, do not underestimate the absolute gargantuan largesse and kick-assedness of America. Like, it's easy to slag it, but this is a first among equals country on every dimension, culturally, artistically, economically, militarily, and we take it for granted. And so when you think about Apple, for their bottom line and their P&L, would they love to have maybe, an easier time to sell phones all around the world? Sure. But it's much more valuable for Apple to make the phones in China for as little as possible and get them to the United States, where they can sell 50 million of them every year.
That's right. Mm-hmm. You sell 50 million phones here, you're not worried about selling 10,000 in El Salvador.
Yeah, or if you look at like the amount of like iPhones sold in India, that's 1.2 billion people. You would think to yourself, hey, hold on a second, let's just go and focus. India can't drive the consumption to support a $3 trillion economy like the United States can. So this is the key insight. America is the country. American consumers, the five of us, okay, the 330 million of us, we create more downstream value for all these companies in all of these countries, in all of these stock markets. And then the question is, well, what is fair if you actually look at it that way? And I think what Trump has wanted to do for a very long time is just make things more fair. And his perspective is, why don't we just make things more proportional? Now, he uses the word, or not he, but I think like the chart and all of this stuff, they use the word like reciprocal, you know, like you tax me X, I tax you Y. I think that was actually the wrong word. I think the right word is more proportional, meaning if you're a country that's taxing our ability to do business in your country, we should have a proportional tax that tries to level that to a reasonable point. But the reality is that it's much more important for them. And I think that what Trump has started is a process of getting like the 80 or 90 most, vibrant trading countries to realize this, that they've had the best of it for 25 years. I think he's also trying to recognize that there's a small sliver of people that have over benefited, meaning like these globalist corporations, the people that own those corporations, at the sake of a lot of Americans. So let's just say, 5 or 10 million Americans absolutely crushed it over the last 25 years with globalism and trade. But that still leaves 325 million Americans that haven't. And so you have to right this ship. That's one. The second thing, though, is you saw this in COVID. America is totally unprepared to fend for herself if push came to shove. We can't make things here anymore, right? We have kids that can make TikToks, but we don't have scientists that can make drugs. That's not sustainable. That's not a secure country. Like if you look at our military programs, right? We spend, I think, $700 billion a year. Those 5 American companies that make all of our weapon systems are American. Great. One step removed, most of the companies that they work with to make those weapon systems are also American. And you say, great. But one step removed, if you look at where all of the key inputs to all of this stuff that we use to keep ourselves safe and to protect our allies and to have influence in the world, all of that stuff can be shut off by China in a snap of a finger.
Can you give an example of what that would be? You're talking about like the screws that go into the plane? Like how derivative?
Much more important than that. It's like, let's just say that I'll use an example that I think we could all relate to. We need to electrify as much of the United States as possible. Okay? Meaning we need more electricity, not less. We barely have enough electricity for all of the needs that we have. Okay? Fair? Yep. There's brownouts. There's all these. Sure. There's all these. It's all nuts. Okay? We need more energy. Okay. One of the things that we need more energy for is electric cars. I'll just use that as an example. Electric cars need an electric motor. So far, so good. All of that stuff can be American. But inside the electric motor, the way that the electric motor works is that there's a magnet that spins really quickly. That magnet is made from something called rare earths. There is nobody right now that can really secure a meaningful pipeline to those rare earths except through the Chinese. They're incredibly good at it. They're incredibly sophisticated. And they have a top-down way of organizing that market. That's an example. Let's say that you need batteries, not like the simple Duracell that you buy at Target, but like the big batteries that can store energy when it's made or whatever. There are two companies that know how to do this at scale. They're both Chinese. And you can go on and on down the line. In every critical market where America needs to be able to take care of itself, right, under all weather conditions, we have become very fragile. So tariffs have this dual-pronged impact. Prong number one is it starts to realign the world order. But prong number two is that it allows us to start taking back control of a lot of these markets so that we do the hard work so that we can rely on ourselves. Otherwise, if something bad were to happen, there's like a lot of really bad outcomes here where we cannot fend for ourselves. We can't make the vaccines we need, okay? We can't make the technological equipment we need. We can't make the computers we need. We can't make the chips we need.
Sorry, follow-up question.